Right? Gather round, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make you question whether we've accidentally stumbled into some sort of alternative reality where the government has decided that absolutely everything qualifies as a reason to take time off work. Keir Starmer's Labour government has just unveiled a proposal that's got employers spitting out their morning tea and workers wondering if they won the lottery without buying a ticket. We're talking about bereavement leave that could potentially cover the death of your second cousin twice removed, your mate from the pub, or quite possibly your neighbour's cat if you were particularly fond of it. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but only slightly. This is the sort of policy that makes you wonder if anyone in Westminster has ever actually run a business or, lived in the real world. Quick favor. If you're finding this absolutely mental and want to stay updated on all the political chaos unfolding in Britain, smash that subscribe button right now. Over 94% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and helps us keep bringing you this content. Cheers if you did. Right, back to this absolute circus. So let's break down what's actually happening here. Because the devil is very much in the details, and these details are absolutely crackers. Under current rules, which, let me be clear, are actually quite reasonable, parents are entitled to up to 2 weeks of bereavement leave if a child dies before turning 18 or if they experience a stillbirth after 24 weeks of pregnancy. That makes sense. It's compassionate. It's necessary. Nobody in their right mind would argue against that. But here's where things start to go off the rails faster than a train service run by the British government. The Employment Rights Bill is now proposing to expand this right to at least 1 week's leave for people who lose a pregnancy before 24 weeks. Again, completely reasonable, genuinely compassionate policy that should have been in place years ago. But then, and this is where you need to hold on to your hats, the consultation document suggests this could be extended to cover the deaths of what they are calling extended family. We're talking blood relatives like cousins, in-laws, step-relatives. And here's the absolute kicker, your chosen family, including friends or relationships that take the place of traditional family. Because apparently these deserve consideration and recognition too. Now, before you start thinking I'm some heartless monster who doesn't believe in mourning your mates, let me be crystal clear about something. Of course people need time to grieve. Of course losing a close friend is devastating. Of course modern families look different than they did 50 years ago. But what we're looking at here isn't a carefully considered policy designed to help people through genuine trauma. This is a consultation document so broad, so vague, so spectacularly open to interpretation that it makes the Brexit negotiations look like a masterclass in clarity and precision. Here's the thing that's got businesses absolutely bricking it. The proposal says workers will be eligible for this leave from their first day at work. Day one. Before they've even figured out where the toilets are or learned their colleagues' names, they could theoretically take a week off because someone they consider part of their chosen family has passed away. And employers, who are already drowning in bureaucracy and struggling with the highest tax burden since the Second World War, are expected to just deal with it. No questions asked. Well, actually, they probably can't ask questions because that would likely be considered insensitive or discriminatory or some other reason to drag them through an employment tribunal. Joanna Marchong from the Adam Smith Institute absolutely nailed it when she told The Telegraph that this proposal might look compassionate but threatens to impose significant costs and administrative burdens on employers at a time when businesses can least afford it. And she's spot on. We're in the middle of an economic situation that's more precarious than a Jenga tower after 10 pints, and the government solution is to introduce legislation that creates what she calls huge uncertainty for firms. Employers won't know when staff may walk out for leave, how long they'll be gone, or what documentation they'll need to request. It's like trying to run a business while playing a game of administrative whack-a-mole where the moles make the rules up as they go along. And let's talk about the practicalities here, because they're absolutely bonkers. The consultation is asking if the definition of family should include virtually anyone the employee considers family. Right, so how exactly is an employer supposed to verify this? Are we going to need sworn affidavits, character witnesses, a detailed explanation of your relationship history? Imagine being the poor human resources manager tasked with deciding whether Dave from accounting's relationship with his best mate from university qualifies as chosen family. You can't ask too many questions because that's intrusive and potentially discriminatory, but you also can't just rubber stamp every request because then you've got no business left to run. It's an impossible position, and it's exactly the sort of thought-out policy that makes businesses think twice about hiring people in the first place. Andrew Griffith, the shadow business secretary, has pointed out what should be blindingly obvious to anyone with half a brain cell. It's important for employers that there's a proportionate limit on what counts as family. But proportionality seems to have gone out the window faster than common sense at a cabinet meeting. We've gone from protecting parents who lose children, which is an unspeakable tragedy that absolutely deserves support, to potentially covering situations where someone might claim bereavement leave for people they are only tangentially connected to. And before the Twitter mob comes for me, I'm not saying people don't genuinely grieve for friends. I'm saying the potential for abuse in a system this broad is absolutely massive, and businesses are rightfully terrified. But wait, there's more, because the story gets even better. The leave would have to be taken within 56 days of the death, which sounds reasonable until you realize that's nearly 2 months. So theoretically, you could have multiple people in your chosen family pass away throughout the year, and you're looking at potentially weeks upon weeks of statutory leave that employers have to accommodate. For small businesses operating on tight margins with small teams, this could be genuinely catastrophic. 1 or 2 people being off unexpectedly for a week at a time can bring operations to a grinding halt. But apparently, that's just tough luck because we're building a compassionate society, and if a few businesses go under in the process, well, that's just collateral damage. Now, here's where things get really spicy, because this bereavement leave bombshell is just one piece of a much larger puzzle that's currently playing out in Westminster, and it involves intrigue, power struggles, and Angela Rayner reminding everyone why she's not someone you want to mess with. The former Deputy Prime Minister has essentially forced Keir Starmer's hand on the entire employment rights bill, getting ministers to agree to implement it from January 2027 instead of October that year. How did she manage this little coup? By threatening to push a Commons amendment demanding a 2026 deadline. That's right. She basically looked at the Prime Minister and said, "Speed this up or I'll make you speed it up." And Starmer blinked. During what's been described as intense debate on the legislation, Rayner sent a very public message to Sir Keir that the government must not blink again. This comes after what can only be described as a humiliating climb down where they ditched the so-called Day 1 rights to claim unfair dismissal to break a standoff with the Lords. So we got a Prime Minister who's already been forced to back down once, being publicly pressured by his former deputy to hold firm on legislation that's got businesses absolutely terrified. It's like watching a game of political chess where everyone's making moves, but nobody seems to have remembered that the board represents real people's livelihoods. And speaking of livelihoods, let's circle back to what this actually means to the average British business. We're already dealing with increased national insurance contributions, higher minimum wage costs, and more red tape than you can shake a stick at. The regulatory burden on businesses is heavier than it's been in decades, and now we're adding in a bereavement leave system so broad it could potentially be claimed for virtually anyone. The compliance costs alone are going to be astronomical. You'll need updated handbooks, new policies, training for managers on how to handle these requests sensitively while also protecting the business, and probably a dedicated team of lawyers on speed dial for when things inevitably go wrong. But here's the truly maddening part. There are ways to do this properly. There are ways to expand bereavement leave that are both compassionate and practical. You could have a tiered system where immediate family gets more leave than distant relatives. You could require some form of verification for extended family claims. You could have a maximum number of claims per year. There are dozens of sensible, workable solutions that would balance the genuine need for grieving time with the practical realities of running a business. But instead, we got a consultation document that reads like it was written by someone who's never had to worry about payroll, staffing levels, or keeping a business afloat during tough economic times. The timing couldn't be worse either. We're in a period where business confidence is already shot. Investment is down. Growth is stagnant. The last thing struggling companies need is another layer of uncertainty and cost. And make no mistake, this will cost businesses money. Whether it's direct costs from paying people who aren't at work, indirect costs from hiring temporary staff or paying overtime to cover absences, or the administrative burden of managing a system that's vaguer than a politician's promise before an election, someone has to foot the bill. And that someone is businesses, which means ultimately it's customers through higher prices and workers through slower wage growth or fewer job opportunities. Meanwhile, Back in the land of Westminster intrigue, speculation is absolutely rampant about what Angela Rayner's really up to. There are rumors flying around about a potential dream ticket deal with Weststreeting. People are openly questioning whether Keir Starmer can survive as Prime Minister. Even Labour Together, the think tank that helped propel him to power in the first place, is quietly asking local parties for their views on potential successors. This is what happens when ideology crashes headfirst into reality. You get well-intentioned policies that sound wonderful in theory, but are absolute nightmares to implement in practice. You get a government so focused on being seen as progressive and compassionate that they forget to ask basic questions like, how will this actually work? And what are the unintended consequences? The consultation runs until January, which means businesses have a few weeks to try to inject some sanity into this process. But given how things are going, I wouldn't hold your breath for common sense to prevail.